Hello, myself Sani Anjum. I am from Davangere, Karnataka, and I have been completed my engineering in Jain Institution of Technology, Davangere, in the stream of electrical and electronic engineering, and I have been completed a course of full stack Java in the J Spiders of the Bangalore, and currently I am pursuing a internship based upon the Java Spring Boot and the microservice. In this, we are going to develop a real time project. So, before we start for the real time project or the overview of the project, all those details, let us first know about the Spring Boot and the microservices. Okay, let me start with from the Spring Boot. So, Spring Boot. Spring Boot provides basic and the advanced concepts of the Spring framework. Like there will be a Spring. In Spring we have a Spring framework. While using the basic and the advanced concept of this, we are going to develop a Spring Boot. Okay, Spring Boot is a Spring model that provides the RAD. RAD means Rapid Application Development feature to the Spring framework. Our Spring Boot tutorial includes all the topics of the Spring Boot such as its features, project, Maven project, starter project, wizard, Spring initializer, applications, annotations, dependency management, properties, starters, JPA, JDBC. Before we start through this, we have to know the basic knowledge about the core Java, web technology, and the JDBC. Okay, as we know little bit, not deeper one. For the project purpose, we can just glance the few points about the these topics. Okay, so what is Spring Boot? First, we will understand what is Spring Boot. Then we will go for the further. Like Spring Boot is a project that is built on the top of the Spring framework. From Spring framework, it provides an easier way. It will provide an easier and the faster way to set up, configure, and run both simple and web-based applications. For using Spring Boot, we have to convert the Spring Boot with the web-based applications, so we can run the web applications through it. Okay, let me start. It is a spring model that provides RAD means as I said, Rapid Application Development. We are going to develop an application feature to the Spring framework. It is used to create a standalone Spring based application that you can just run because it needs minimal Spring configuration. Okay, for example, for creating a Spring Boot, we should have the Spring framework plus embedded HTTP for the service pro for the service. Okay, like a Tomcat, GT, other types of service are providing, but for our project we are using Tomcat service. Okay, with this we are going to minimize like XML configuration or at configuration. All these three adding, we get an Spring Boot application. Okay, in short, Spring Boot is a combination of the Spring framework and the embedded service. Okay, in Spring Boot there is no requirement for the XML configuration. We are not going to use XML configuration because it will be a lengthy process, because the professional also peoples are at learning about it. So Spring Boot is a easy way to understand and create a web application. So we are going to use only Spring framework and the embedded service. So we can use Spring STS IDE or the Spring initializer to develop a Spring Boot Java application. For example, if you want to create any Spring Boot application, we can directly go from the Google like a Spring initializer. In that we can create a Spring Boot Java application. Otherwise we can use like tools, Spring tools, and in that we can go and create, develop, and add the dependencies, jars, all those things. It will be lengthy. If you don't want to use that lengthy process, so we can go for the Spring Initialize. I will send you the I will mention the link in the below, you can see it out. So let us first know about why we should use Spring Boot framework. Okay, because we have to use Spring Boot framework, the dependency injection approach is used in the Spring Boot. We have a dependency as a Spring Boot web dependency. It will be in a Spring Initializer. You can go there and search for the dependency. It will be easy method for adding the jars in your file, because you don't want to grab all the jars and import in your application, then you can run the project. It will be hectic. So we are going to take the inbuilt dependency which are provided in the Spring Boot. Okay, it contains powerful database transaction management capability. In this we can develop like we can transact the management capability of the database. We can store the datas in this input, it's already inbuilt in the application. We don't have to import that and start from the beginning. Okay, it is simplifies integration with the other Java frameworks like Hibernate, Struts, etc. Okay, it reduces the cost and the development time of the application. As I said before, if we are going to create it by ourselves, we have to import all other dependencies, jars, like Java details, all those packages we have to import by ourselves. But if we go for the Spring Boot Java application, it will present the all the features in the inbuilt. As the dependency all will be present in that only, we don't have to analyze and glance all those things. Okay, so along with the Spring Boot framework, many other Spring sister projects helps to build application addressing modern business needs. Okay, there are following Spring sisters projects are provided, like a Spring Data, Spring Batch, Spring Securities, Spring Social, Spring Integration. All these are the sisters of the Springs. Okay, while using this we can implement a Spring Boot application. Okay, let's not go deeper for the Spring Boot applications, because all these sisters are not used for the our project purpose. So we will just know the basic about it. Okay, so what is the advantages of the Spring Boot? Okay, let's start. It creates this standalone Spring application that can be started using Java jar. As I said, the jar will be present inbuilt it with the Spring Boot. So it is so useful to use Spring Boot over than Spring. Okay, and it tests web application easily with the help of the inbuilt embedded HTTP service such as Tomcat. As I said, we are going to use a service which is called as the Tomcat for testing purpose. For example, if we are creating a Spring Boot application, we are going to test it by ourselves. Like a web application, we are going to test it by ourselves because we have an inbuilt server like Tomcat. So it is the advantages for us, and it provides obstinate starter prompts to simplify our Maven configuration. For example, if we are going to configure a Maven project, we have to add dependencies, jars, all those things. But it provides a starters. It as a Spring Boot only provides a starters to simplify our Maven configuration. It provides production ready features just such as metrics, health check, and the externalized configuration. Okay, there is no requirement for XML configuration. As I said, there will be no requirement of XML configuration. With the help of Spring framework and the embedded HTTP service, we can create an Spring Boot application. Okay, so these are the advantages. What is the limitation of the Spring Boot? For example, Spring Boot can use dependencies that are not going to used in the application. These dependencies increase the size of the application. For example, if you are going to create any Spring Boot application, there will be a lot of dependencies, jar files, packages, all those things. But while using this all, the project will be a lengthy, it will be a congested, like we will face a problems through using that dependencies, way to implement, way to see that, way to search, all those things, it will be a headache. That's why we have to use only the limited dependency to increase the size of the applications. Okay, so we are going to use only the required dependency which are going to help us to create a web application. Okay, so there are the goals of the Spring Boots also. For example, the main goal for the Spring Boot is to reduce development. We are going to reduce our executing or writing the codes, all the developments, unit testing. Like we have a server, embedded server in our Spring Boot application, so we are going to reduce the time of like facing any problems, all those things. It's a unit test and the integration test time also, it will reduce our time, so we can focus more on the development and easy way to get developed the application so sooner. Okay, so it provides the opinionated development approach. It will only provide the development approach, how to provide, how to configure, all those things. It avoids defining more annotation configuration. For example, if you go on learning for the annotations, there are plenty, like more number of annotations. Okay, but in a while implementing this project which we are going to develop for the real time project, we just need some little bit of annotations, so we can reduce the size of the development and the time, all those things. So it will be our goal. Okay, we avoid XML configuration, we avoid writing lot of import statements. For example, if we are going to import any like annotations like REST API, REST controller, post mapping, get mapping, all those things, we have to import more things, so we are going to reduce the writing lot of import statements. Okay, if we are creating a Spring Boot application, then we are not going to use any other things to get cleared over here. Okay, pre-required of the Spring Boot, what are the tools we require for creating a Spring Boot application? We just need a Java. We are going to use Java version of 17 and the Maven and the Spring framework which is inbuilt. Okay, and a IDE like a Spring Boot suits is recommended. Like for example, if you go and search in the Google downloading Spring Boot tools, you will get an application where you can import your project and start execute and analyze and configure all those the applications you are going to create, all those things. Okay, so Spring Boot features, what are the features are used for the Spring Boot? We are going to use web development, Spring application events and the listeners, admin features, externalized configuration, properties files, type space configuration, logging, security, all those things we are going to implement in a Spring Boot features are all those things. So let us start with the web development. Web development, it is a well suited Spring module for the web application development. We can easily create a self-contained HTTP application that uses embedded service like the Tomcat. While using Tomcat, we can create a Spring Boot starter web. Okay, so web development is used. Spring application, for example, if you are going to create any Spring Boot application, we need a Spring application also. So Spring application is a class that provides a convenient way to bootstrap a Spring application. It can be started from the main method. We can call the application just by calling a static run. While using a static run, we can call the method. Okay, so next will be the application events and the listeners. What is this? Let us discuss. Spring Boot uses events to handle the varieties of tasks. Okay, like in Spring Boot, we are going to perform some events which are going to handle the varieties of tasks which we are going to provide for creating a Spring Boot web application. Okay, next, admin support. Spring Boot provides the facilities to enable admin related features for the application. It is used to access and manage application remotely. We can enable it in the Spring Boot application using Spring Boot application admin enabled. While enabling the admin, we can use and access the application remotely. We don't have to create it and implement all those things. It will be a reduction for our development. Okay, all are this about the features. And next feature will be the properties file. For example, Spring Boot provides a rich set of application properties, so we can use that in the properties file of our project. The property file is used to set properties like server port 8082 and many others. We are different ports for accessing the server. Basically, Tomcat uses 8080 port. If we want to change the port, there will be an application property. We are going to we will discuss when we go on a live, like showing the tools, all those things. There will be a application properties. Okay, next will be a type safe configuration. The strong type safe configuration is provided to govern and validate the configuration of the application. Application configuration is always a task which should be a type safe. We can also use annotation provided by the libraries. There will be more annotations which are present already in the libraries. We are going to keep it safe for our further use, like security purpose. If you are doing any real-time project with your clients or any other for the freelancer, if someone accesses that, so we have to keep some type safe configuration in it. And we have a security feature also, like Spring Boot application are Spring basis web applications, so it is secure by the default with the basic authentication on all HTTP endpoints. HTTP is used for the server. If you are going to start any web application, we have to use one server like URL type www dot, all these are the URLs, right? For running this, we have to generate an URL which starts from the HTTP, which will secure. A rich set of endpoints is available to develop a secure Spring Boot applications. Okay, so these are the features of Spring Boot applications. Okay, let us, now we have been completed about the Spring Boot, why we are going to use this Spring Boot. Okay, Next, what is the difference between of Spring Boot and the Spring VCS? Do you know what is meaning about VCS? Let us start from the what is VCS. VCS is a web MVC framework for building web applications. It is a web MVC like a model view configuration model view controller based upon the web frameworks. For creating a Spring Boot application, we need to have a model view controllers also for web applications, web framework, all those things. Okay, let us know difference between the Spring and Spring Boot. Then we will discuss about the Spring Boot and Spring MVC. Okay, first Spring Framework is widely used in the Java EE framework for building application, but Spring Boot framework is widely used to develop a REST application like web application, all those things. We are going to use Spring Boot. Next, Spring, it aims to simplify Java EE development that makes development more productive. For example, for creating a Java, it will develop more productive things in the Spring. But in a Spring Boot, it aims to shorten the code length. It will reduce the code length and provides the easiest way to develop a web application. It reduces the writing the codes, all those things. It will be easy for us to configure and develop more features in that application. If we go on using Spring frameworks, we will create productive development, but it will take lengthy of time, more patience, more knowledge about all those things, so it will be a headache. But Spring Boot is better than the Spring framework, but we are going to use Spring framework in Spring Boot only for creating a Spring Boot application. It helps to make things similar by allowing us to develop loosely coupled application. We can develop more application using Spring Boot, but using Spring framework, but using Spring Boot, it helps to create a standalone application with less configuration. It will create only one application with the less configuration, like we are going to write only shorter codes, so it will be a single application which can be configured easily and the faster way. To test the Spring projects, we need to set up the server explicitly. Explicitly means we have to purchase the server, then we are going to test the Spring projects. But in Spring Boot, we are offering a embedded service. As I said before, we are Spring Boot offers embedded service such as GT and the Tomcat, but we are going to use Tomcat server, which will be executed in the port of 8080. Okay, so this is the difference. And we have one more difference, like in Spring, the developer writes lots of code to do the minimal task, but in our Spring Boot, it reduces the boilerplate codes. Like boilerplate means is the basic standard code we are going to use, and we are going to configure in a less codes. We are not going to write lots of codes for configuration. So this is the difference between the Spring and Spring Boot. But in Spring Boot versus Spring MWC, let us discuss about it. Spring Boot makes, as I said, easy to quickly bootstrap and start developing a Spring based application. It avoids a lot of boilerplate codes. It hides a lot of complexity behind the scenes so that the developer can quickly start it and develop all those things. Okay, so and the Spring MVC is a MVC framework for building web applications. We are going to build a web application. It contains a lot of configuration files for the various capability. It is an HTTP oriented web application development framework. Okay, as we said, we are going to convert Spring Boot application to the web REST API. So we are going to use Spring MVC. Okay, so let us know the difference between Spring Boot and the Spring MVC. Spring Boot is a model of Spring for packaging the Spring based application with sensible defaults, but MVC Springs is a model view controller based web framework under the Spring framework. Okay, we are going to use packages in the Spring Boot, but in Spring MVC we are going to we are using model view controller based web frameworks. Okay, in Spring Boot it provides default configuration to build Spring Boot powder framework, but in Spring MVC it provides ready to use features for the building and web applications. As I said before, if you are going to use Spring frameworks, we have to implement dependencies from the libraries. All those things will be a headache, but while using Spring MVC we can we get ready to use features for building and web applications, so it will be easier. In Spring Boot there is no need to build configuration manually, but in Spring MVC it requires build configuration manually. Like as I said before, there will be a libraries, jars, packages, Maven dependency, all those things already present in the application, because we are going to uh, add a Maven dependency of the Spring Web. That's why it will be easy. So we will require build configuration manually. In Spring Boot, it reduces development time and increases productivity. Same in the Spring MVC, it takes more time to achieve the same. Like as we said, there are more difference. Like Spring Boot is also easy way and the Spring MVC is also better way, but there will be some difference between, like there will be some up and downs in there, but we are going to use Spring Boot only because we are going to convert the Spring Boot application to the web application REST API, all those things. So it will be a difference between. So in Spring Boot there is no requirement for a development descriptor. We don't need anyone to uh, develop anything for us. We can develop it by ourselves. But in Spring MVC we need development descriptor is required. Okay, so this is the difference between about the all three things. And now we are going to know details about the SB structure, like Spring Boot structure. There will be a 3 layers in the Spring Boot. There will be a 4 layers in Spring Boot. For example, presentation layer, business layer, persistence layer, database layer. Okay, we have this 4 layers. For example, we are going to presentation layer first. Presentation layer means JSON translation, authentications, all are present in presentation layers. In business layers we have an business logics, validation, authorization, all those things. In persistence layer we have a storage logics. We have inbuilt storage logics which are present in our Spring Boot application. database, actual database, which we are going to create in a while using JDBC or database application. All this are okay. So this is the layers of okay. Let me share you. Let me see the proper definition of the presentation layer. The presentation layers handles the HTTP requires translates the JSON parameters to the object. There will be a JSON parameters which are required to request and transfers it to the business layers. There will be an authentication. With the help of that authentication, we are going to transfer it for the business layers in short way. Business layer handles all the business logics. It consists of service classes and the uses service provider by the data access layer. Okay. Next, persistence layer. Persistent layers contains all the logics and translates business objects from and to the database. It will act as a bipolar, like it will collects all the storage logics from the basic business layer and it will be transferred for the database layer. Next layer, database layer. In database layer, CRUD operation are performed. As we know, CRUD means create, read, update and then delete. We are going to perform this methods in the database layers. We are going to take the storage logics from the business and then we are going to transfer it for the database layers. So this is the definite Spring Boot flow architecture. Okay, so I will share you this details and the things which has been discussed with the help of a link below. Thank you. In the next, we are going to learn about the microservice, how it performs, what are the architecture of that microservice and how it going to perform all those things. Thank you.